accessible as well. Even to non-lawyers, I think you can easily pick this up and really understand what it's all about, which is quite rare, I think, for a legal book, Tony. So, Tony, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this wonderful, mad world of filmmaking and creativity?
How many hours have you got? Okay, so well, she's already told you, I'm a media lawyer, so I'm a qualified solicitor, have been for a long time. Most of the clients that I work with these days are really in film and TV and some music. I used to do more music than film, but it's very much the other way around now. My background originally was in litigation, which is really not a very good way of solving disputes, and I got a bit fed up with litigation, but a lot of the work I was doing was in media, and I gradually transferred from beating people up to trying to do deals, which also involves beating people up. So that's that. How did I get into this? Very early in my career, somebody came to me, I don't know, about 3 or 4 years in, I guess. An accountant that I knew had some clients who'd invested in a film. It's a wonderful film, brackets not, which was on Sky Movies for a very long time, called Red Tide or Blood Tide. They keep changing the name of it. And it was this kind of vague sort of horror-ish film set in Greece and had sort of cameos from people like Irene Papas and Jose Ferrer. So this will date the film to, it's more than 40 years ago, actually. What happened, the people invested in this film, and the director was a bit of a loose cannon, and he shot hundreds of hours of mostly unusable rubbish. And the investors were a bit unhappy that their money had gone down the gurgler. And I was brought in to sort out the mess. Long story short, I did. And we got this bloke involved who was a bit of a line producer, and he brought in a very young Jeremy Thomas, who was not long out of film school or whatever. And Jeremy got this heap of film and turned it into something that was at least good enough to be on the Z list on Sky Movies a year or so ago. Of course, he never looked back, and I try not to. So that's how I really got into the film stuff. And then, you know, once you start doing something, one client leads to another, and people recommend you, and that's how I started doing it, I guess.
Fantastic. And the book, Tony, I mean, it's, you know, it's quite, I think it's quite rare for lawyers, unless they're, you know, lecturers or teachers or whatever, to actually write books like this. You know, how did that actually come about?
That is actually quite an interesting question, because as some of you, most of you, a few of you, none of you will know, may know, could know, for the last 10 or 12 years, Mr. Elliot Grove, who on my screen is two below, got me along to Rain Dance because he wanted to have somebody there to talk about legal stuff on the producer's certificate, which is a 5-lecture gig that I thoroughly recommend. Plug. And he's not paying me for the plugs. And he sort of said, you know, just talk about contracts and IP and all that kind of stuff. So I sort of put this thing together, and over the years it's sort of got more and more refined, and it does change from one lecture to the next. So it's always worth signing up for another one if you want to. But what I found was that I was trying to telescope sort of 30 or 40 years of experience into 2.5 hours, which is basically impossible. But it's a question of distilling key things and getting key messages over, and you're going to ask me about those in a minute. And one of the things that continually happened was that students would come up to me afterwards, or more likely email me the following day and say, "Oh, we enjoyed your lecture, and I hadn't given them anything to drink beforehand. We enjoyed your lecture. Where can we buy a book that's got all this stuff in it?
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I'll find you, and let me. So I looked around, and the only books that I could really find were these great big things about this big, written by Americans with 4-syllable surnames, and very dense California law, lots of, and it's like, well, no one's going to, I wouldn't read that. I mean, it's boring. There's nothing in the UK at all. So I remember saying to Elliot, I said, maybe I should write a book. And he said, yeah, do it, we'll promote it, blah, 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 blah. And I just knocked it out, really. And I basically took the lecture outline and expanded it. And then I expanded it again with the second edition.
Yeah.
And I'm already saving up bits for the third edition, which I'll probably do maybe next year. Because as soon as you finish, as anyone knows, whether you're writing a script, an article or anything, as soon as you finish something and it goes off to press, you think, oh, I left this out, or I could have said that better. I think with any piece of work, it's never really finished if you genuinely have a feeling for it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I love about it is it's one of those things whereby you wouldn't necessarily read it every night before you go to bed, because it's not that kind of story necessarily, no offense. But it's what I would call like my right-hand companion while I'm writing something or while I'm working on something. And what I find especially useful is, I think the last 100-odd pages are really, really helpful pro formas of contracts and various things, which, is superb. I mean, obviously, that doesn't mean that you don't need to consult a lawyer like Tony. Obviously, you would need to if you needed to get an agreement. But it's just really helpful to get an idea of things, I think.
Yeah, I'm very skeptical about the contracts. Again, I think this is something that Elliot thought was a very, very good idea and persuaded me. In the first edition, I put a few in, and then this time I put a more complete set. The problem with those kind of things is that no two deals are ever the same. Doesn't matter if it's a writer's agreement or a producer, no two are the same. And there's all sorts of words of warning. So, these are guidelines.
Of course, yeah.
And if you go on to, I can't remember if it's the Filmmakers Legal Facebook page or the reviews of the first edition on Amazon, you'll see that there are people who've actually used these contracts to do a whole film. And apparently none of them got sued, so they can't be that bad.
Brilliant.
But you do have to have a little bit of savvy when you're using them.
Yeah, but I think it helps people to to get a feel for what a contract or a particular agreement looks like, or should look like, certainly.
Yeah.
There's one quote that I especially like, so I'm just going to mention that before we dive into some of the detail. And it's on the role of the lawyer. And you say, it often falls to the lawyers to endeavour to balance the competing creative and commercial requirements of contracting parties. It's a cliche, but art and business seldom make easy bedfellows. So I really liked that. And I guess it was a sort of an ask for you this evening to make our bed as comfortable as possible as creatives, to give us some tips and ideas. As much as you can. But I thought that was a really sweet little quote. So.
Oh, did you want me to say something?
No, not really. Just to say, oh yes, wonderful, thank you.
Well, no, I would say that there is rarely a week that goes by where I'm not needed, well, I don't need to say it, but where I do say it to people, particularly with very idealistic people who may be working on their first or second project. because they're so, what's the word, enthusiastic and so blinkered about the creative side that they don't realize quite what they're letting themselves in for. And yeah. I think I'm kind of guessing at one of the things you wanted to ask me later on in the thing. All right, we'll get there. We'll get there. Okay. I don't want to upset your. Jennie's done a fantastic amount of preparation for this.
With the book?
No, I mean, I've got, you know, the questions.
Well, as I always say, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. That's one of the favorite mottos. But right. Yeah. So in the book, you kind of, I really like the way that you separate things out into rights, content, contracts, and then exploitation, which I like to refer to as the spoils of the creativity. And focusing firstly on rights. I mean, as creatives, I think many of us think, oh, we don't need to worry about intellectual property or rights. That's for the lawyers to deal with. Why, can you tell us why is it important to us as creatives to think about these things?
I can.
Thank you.
I will then, okay. Hold on a sec. Pause for thought. Okay, so look, this is the sort of, the way I kind of always sort of put this, and I can see several people here who've managed to stay awake through one or other of my lectures in the past. Essentially, when you're putting a project together, if you're a producer, and I know we're mainly talking to sort of writer-director types here tonight, as a creative, you have to think that a producer is creating this kind of tapestry of different rights, and they're all woven together with contracts. And in order for that producer to be able to have a complete tapestry or film, the producer needs to know that all the rights are there, they've all been stuck together properly, so that the producer can then go out and sell the film to a broadcaster or an exhibitor. And if you're a writer, for example, and let's stick with writers, whether you like it or not, as soon as you start putting something down on paper or on a screen or on a file or whatever it is, you are creating a work of copyright. And I don't know how legalistic we're supposed to get, Jennie. If I get boring, just tell, you know, mute me or something. Or, I'll get my wife to come in with a bucket and stick it over my head. But a copyright arises as a matter of law. So there's no copyright in an idea, but there's a copyright in the expression of the idea. So if you write out a treatment for, you know, 40 people on a Zoom, and some, you know, wave comes from outer space, sucks all the people out, and then 20 years later chucks them back in the same place, and you've then got a 40-part Netflix series about what happened to each one. You know, that's my idea. Okay. Once I write it down as a treatment or a script or a summary, then to the extent that that's an original literary work, copyright will vest in it. And I'm the author of that literary work. There are exceptions to when I will be the first owner, but as the author, I'm the owner, and I've got a piece of copyright. And that is one of the building blocks of a film, and it has a value, you hope. And it particularly has a value if you've got a producer or someone else with a checkbook, some of you may not know what a checkbook is, a bank account with money in it that can be transferred. You may have someone who's got some dosh that wants to invest in your film. They want to know that if they're going to invest, they can acquire the copyright and that you control it. And then, you know, there's lots of other rights in a film, but let's not get too stuck on that detail, Jennie.
Yeah, so that's really helpful. So at what stage then should we be protecting the expression of these ideas? How early on in the creative process?
Right. This is a very vexed question, and all the answers I give are rubbish, but they're the same answers that you'll get from everybody else.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the UK and the EU, and for the British people online, the EU is an organisation that we used to belong to. The fortunate thing about the EU was that it harmonised copyright law throughout the 28 countries, now 27. And what I can tell you is that the copyright law in the UK will not change as far as we're aware. So anything I say is good for all of you people in continental Europe and or working with Europeans. I've forgotten the question, but anyway, when do we have to protect? So the point is this, that there's no system of registration of copyright in the EU, okay? In the US, there's a thing called the Library of Congress where you can register a copyright if you want to. I'm always in two minds about it. In terms of a screenplay, there are lots and lots of services that provide registration facilities. So that if you do write a screenplay, you can register it, for example, with the WGA, the Writers Guild of America, or even at Raindance. And Raindance will provide a registration service. And I can see about 5 people here I know have registered screenplays with Raindance. So that is one way of doing it. But all these registrations will give what the lawyers call a rebuttable presumption that you're the owner. I was told as a very young solicitor by a very experienced barrister who I learned lots of copyright law from because I hadn't studied at a university, that the hardest case in the world to win is a disputed copyright case. Why? Because, well, hang on, well, no, I wrote that because I was sitting in my office, in my house, and I spent, you know, that Christmas of 2020 writing out this, and here's my original, you know, it's all of that. There are a few simple things that you can do is embed in the footer, if you're working on Word, which is what I do, embed in the footer of your document from the minute you start typing it, C in a circle, Swati Jug, for example, 2021. And that means that whenever you copy it or print it out or send it on an email, that person's on notice that you've asserted copyright. And under the international treaties, that's one way of protecting it. One of the other problems that you get, though, is when you collaborate with someone else. And we're going to talk about friends later. And I'm not talking about a Pony 90s TV series, oh, probably got into trouble there, TV series. When you're collaborating with someone, if 2 of you sit down in a room over a period of 3 or 4 weeks or months or whatever and knock out a screenplay, it is, to all intents and purposes, it's a work of joint authorship. And under English/EU law, neither one of 2 or more joint authors can deal with jointly authored copyright without the consent of the other authors. And there's a presumption that you're each entitled effectively to a 1/2 interest in that copyright. However, it may be that one of you has actually done about 80% of the work and the other one has only done about 20% of the work, in which case you must have a clear understanding as to who has the controlling interest in this script, who owns it, and in what shares. And you can write that down on a piece of paper in 5 lines and get the other person to sign it. And that is very good evidence to show that it's a work of joint authorship and you're the 80% writer and your friend is the 20%. So that's another thing you can do. Am I answering the question, Jenny?
Yes, you are. That's really helpful and practical. With regards to that agreement between the 2 people, do you need a third party to witness that?
You don't need to. But when you're sitting in the courtroom with barristers stretching back, you don't need to, but yeah, you can. It's always a good idea.
That's really helpful. No, you are answering the question, and some really helpful tips as well. I think practical tips on what people can actually do. Another thing that struck me from reading the book is that 70 years seems to be a very important date for a lot of content information. Why is 70 years so important to us as creatives?
When I saw you writing that question, I thought, this is like, some Greek mythology question. No, okay. So again, in UK EU, a copyright expires 70 years after the death of the author. So, for example, I haven't got my books from the other room. If you want to make a film based on a book by, let's say, John le Carré, you'd have to get the permission of his estate for the next sort of 69 years and however many days it is, because as we know, he recently died. His work will remain in copyright until the 31st of December 2090. So it's 70 years after the end of the year in which the author dies. If it's a work of joint authorship, it's 70 years after the death of the last to die. On the other hand, what it does mean is that the work that you're creating now, your original copyright work that you're creating in 2021, will extend and right through your own life or the rest of it, plus 70 years after that. So your children, grandchildren, and whoever else will be able to benefit from any income generated by those copyrights.
Okay, great. And this picture on the front of your wonderful book, which is a great picture, I absolutely love it. Every time I pick it up, I think it's such an awesome picture. How did you manage to get that? Did you have to wait 70
story, actually. It's a good story. Okay, so this picture shows Cecil B. DeMille here and his crew. And somewhere online, I found the names of all these people. One was the DP and one was the, I don't know, whatever she was, producer, whatever. I found it online, and to the best that I could discern, and I've been using it for several years, I couldn't work out, and it's also American photograph, and the rules of copyright and registration in America are horribly complicated, and it's not something that I ever try and advise on without help from with a little help from one of my friends in the US. And I couldn't decide if it was out of copyright or not. But in any event, when I tried to download the picture from some, I don't know, wherever I found it, it was not very good. Anyway, I did a bit of research and I found out that the Cecil B. DeMille archive is owned or controlled by somewhere in Utah. And as you probably know, the Mormons are great ones for archives and genealogy and all the rest of it. So I got in touch with this university library in Provo, Utah, where I once had a litigation matter, actually.
Oh, wow.
And I said, is it copyright? And they said, well, we don't know. But what we will do is we will license you the right to use our 5 billion megapixel version. And you can have that for your book, forever and ever for $100 or whatever it was, something like that, to maybe 120. And that was it. I think it's fairly likely, as the photograph is now 100 years old, I think it probably is out of copyright.
Wow. So is that something, that's a really interesting story. Is that something that, you know, could filmmakers, you know, go through that kind of process, sort of get stills and use it in a movie and do the same sort of thing that you did?
Right. So the copyright in a photograph vests in the photographer.
Yeah.
There are exceptions to that where a photographer's hired and so on. But let's just say it's a freelance photographer. That photographer will own the photograph, and the copyright will expire 70 years after the death of the photographer. That particular photograph is American, and the rules are very complicated, it doesn't matter. So the answer is this: if you want to use a photograph that's in copyright on screen, then you need to get the permission of the owner of the copyright, which will probably be the photographer. Obviously, there's lots of online resources and libraries, and you know, Getty, and the other big one in America that begins with B, and I can't remember the name offhand. They will give you a license to use the photograph, but very often they will say you can use the photograph, but we can't tell you whether or not it's in or out of copyright, and you may have to go and clear the copyright with someone else, but you can use our digital image, which is exactly what happened with me. And I put something in the book that I got it from there, and no one's ever, Cecil B. DeMille's great-grandson hasn't knocked on my front door, so.
Well, that's really helpful to know that.
He broke in through the window with a knife. You know,
So my next question was going to be about contract, but I kind of think you've maybe already answered that. So it was to say that as creatives, we like to keep things quite sort of friendly to encourage idea generation.
is this the...
Yeah, I mean, you know, and we don't really necessarily want to get formal. I guess it's, you know, if we've made an agreement like you suggest, we've signed a piece of paper, we've put the copyright into what we're writing, at what stage do we actually need to engage a lawyer?
Right. One of the things that you're going to ask me, but I am now going to mention it, is, you know, what goes wrong most often? And the classic question that I get asked, particularly at Raindance lectures, is, and they always sit in the front row although I haven't done an in the flesh lecture at Raindance for over a year now, but they always sit in the front row, and they usually get a question in after about 4 minutes and 5 seconds, and they always say, they start off by saying, my friend and I, and as soon as I hear my friend, I know exactly what's coming. These people are not friends. They're complete, I better you choose my language carefully, naughty people that have taken advantage of this young writer, director, producer, and messed up a project. And what happens is everyone gets seduced by the excitement of the project, doesn't come to any clear understanding. Forget writing a contract down, forget even sending anything an email. There's no, what we call in legal parlance, meeting of minds. And people proceed on an impression that they've come to an understanding with whoever it may be, whether it's a putative producer with an idea hiring a writer, or the one that really, really upsets me. And I've had this 2 or 3 times where youngish writer directors, you know, have raised 50, 60 grand, family and friends, to make a 30 or 40-minute film as a bit of a calling card. And, you know, they've gone on to some pretty dim Facebook group and found Arnie Varnsbarns, the producer. And it's all a bit Duddy Kravitz, if you know that movie. You know it, Jenny. And you get these kind of, yeah. And they basically get ripped off. They've got no contracts. They've relied on this producer who probably does nothing much more than produce business cards to put the whole project together. And it's just totally and utterly stupid.
Yeah.
And the flip side to that comment is the answer to your question, which is, A, it's never too soon to consult a lawyer, but then I would say that. Even if it's just to get some steering, some guidelines, because the one thing you must do, I'm doing Alan Partridge here, is get that understanding clear.
Yeah.
Get something down in paper. It can be an email. Email's great. WhatsApp, you know, I have taken a case to court on WhatsApps as evidence of a contract. It works, but it's messy.
Yeah.
At least with an email trail, you know, dear Tremaine, I refer to our meeting in the pub on Thursday when you agreed to write my screenplay for £1,000. I'm transferring 500 quid today to your PayPal account. You will deliver the first draft on, you know, the 1st of March. I want a 45-minute script on the subject of such and such, which we discussed. And when I've got the screenplay, I'll pay you the other 500 quid. And by the way, it's my copyright because I'm commissioning you to do it, right? And you write back and say, yeah, I thought you said 1,500 and it was going to be 750. And I said, oh, yeah. And then you've got a clear paper trail and you've got something that's better than nothing. Which leads on to the second big mistake. I'm messing up your, yeah, I'm kind of.
Let's go with the flow. Let's duck and dive. It's fine.
The second thing, or one of the second things that people get wrong most often, and there's 4 or 5 even now, I'm not sure actually, is that they think that, you know, I say to Tremaine, I'm gonna hire you to write the script. I do not own it. In order for me to own the screenplay that Tremaine is writing for me, so I'm only picking on her because her name's right underneath me, and it's just easy for me to look at you. The one thing that you must have in writing is a transfer of ownership of copyright, what we call an assignment. So in order for me to own the copyright that Tremaine is writing, I would need her even to say, I, Tremaine, hereby transfer ownership of the copyright in the 40 people on a Zoom screenplay to you, Tony Morris, signed, and then a real ink signature, Tremaine. And that way there's a evidence of an assignment of copyright. But in terms of coming in, you know, I mean, I could talk about this all night, and frequently have. People can come in, and I've got something at the moment where, actually, I better make sure they're not online, haven't I? Yeah, well, it's quite common where you'll get someone coming in at the very beginning in a very sensible way and saying, you know, look, I need to make sure that I do not mess this up. I made this film 3 years ago. I made every mistake. I want to make sure, what do I need to get in writing? How do I go about it? Do I need you to draft something? At what point do I come in? That you can never do that too soon.
Yeah.
The worst thing, I've got one at the moment where this chap has got a pretty well developed screenplay, has gone out and found someone to finance it, has negotiated all the terms and signed a heads of terms without any legal advice. And, you know, there are different types of contract. Okay, you have good, they're rare, fair, which is what it should be, reasonable, not so good, bad, very bad, rape and pillage. And this one is in the rape and pillage category.
Yeah.
And it's like, what do you want me to do? You know, you've given everything away.
Yeah.
And yeah, but he was going to pay them. It's like, you know, it's the old thing: marry in haste, repent at leisure. God, we're coming out with some good cliches tonight between us, Jenny,
Oh,
aren't
we
we?
are, aren't we? Yeah, you can always rely on lawyers for that. So what about, there's a few questions coming in that are kind of relevant to what we've been skirting around. One of them is, what about a script that's registered in the States, but the writer wants to sell it in the UK or Europe? What must the writer do to protect the rights of ownership?
Already done so. You know, registering it in the WGA is fine.
Yeah.
You can sell it to, you know,
Yeah.
a producer in the Antarctica if you can find one who wants to buy it.
Yeah. Then we've got another question from Nia. How long after an infringement can action be taken to get your dues? Is it about contemporaneous, or can you get really mad and take action after the moment passes when the penny drops?
Right. So basically in the UK, and this does vary in different countries around Europe, you have 6 years. So the two areas where we would look at taking action, providing A, it was worth doing, and B, you're sufficiently resourced to be able to do it, are copyright infringement or breach of contract. And in each case, it's 6 years in terms of copyright from the date of infringement. So, for example, if you know, I've had these things where people have written screenplays, or you know, their film has been pirated altogether. If it was pirated at any time from, what's the date today? 7th of January 2016, you're still within the limitation period to bring a copyright case. If you bring it, let's say that the film was released in 2010,
Yeah.
you can still bring a copyright infringement case, but you can only claim damages back 6 years from the date you file the case. So if that film made a, you know, a shed load of money between 2010 and 2015, you've probably missed out on a lot of the damages that you might have got. In terms of breach of contract, you can bring a claim up to 6 years from the date upon which you discovered the breach, or ought to have discovered it.
Okay.
Or the breach itself.
Good to know. I'm taking a few of these questions in the chat because I think they're really good questions. Another one here is, I'm confused about dreaded music rights. I've paid a band to cover a song. It's old and not very popular. I've contacted the publisher of the song for a sync license, and they've offered $350 per side, MFN, festival rights 2 years. Could you clarify if they want 350 times 2? Well, that's not really for Tony, but does this seem expensive for just composition rights for festivals only?
Depends on the song, depends on the film, depends on hundreds of things. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I would never do a deal for festival rights, really. And yeah, I mean, who asked the thing? Lyndon, I can't see him. He's high. Oh, there he is. Hi. Yeah, I mean, maybe we could probably get into a lot of detail on that. So shall we talk about that later on? If people, when everyone else has gone to bed, we can have a quick look about that.
Sure, no worries. So the other thing, I mean, we've kind of gone through some of the things about lawyers coming in and bringing lawyers in to advise on things. I mean, for people who are, you know, kind of thinking, oh, I'm a poor creative and I don't have any money. I mean, personally, I think that time spent on legal fees could avoid a lot of money spent at the end of the process if things go, sorry, TITS up. And, you know, it's not necessarily that expensive, is it really?
No, I mean, I usually, depending how much I like or dislike someone, I'll certainly give them a freebie to start with. And I can see at least 5 people here who've had freebies of me. The thing is, with independent production, if you're dealing with lawyers who deal with independent production all the time, you will not get charged an hourly rate. And if you are being asked to pay an hourly rate, then go to a different lawyer, because we are used to dealing with people who have fixed budgets. And one of the line items in that budget should be legal fees. Once you get to the stage of 100,000, 200,000, £2 million film, then at that point you will sit down with your lawyer and say, right, I'm making this film for X. This is what it is. What legal work do I need? And let's build the budget up so that I can go to the financier and say, I have got 20 grand in here, or 5 grand, or 500, or whatever it may be. And of course, one of the things you will then equip yourself with is my legal list, which I will send through, and you can tick off, I need this, I don't need that, don't need that. I need a location agreement. I don't need sync license for music because there's not going to be any music, or whatever it may be. And then we sit down and work out what the legal budget should be. But yes, most of the work that I do on independent films is on fixed fees. So if someone says, I need a writer's agreement and a director's agreement, but the rest of it, the line producer's going to do, then we work it out, or whatever it may be.
Yeah. And if somebody was, keen to sort of get going on a documentary and start maybe, I don't know, start doing a documentary about some musician or something like that, in that sort of case, is it absolutely essential to have an agreement in place? With the musician concerned?
Right, this is quite a big question. It's a kind of multi-layered question. So let's just take a documentary about anyone to start with.
Yeah.
You can make a documentary about anyone you like. So you could do, life and times of Jennie Griffiths. You could do the life and times of H.G. Wells. You could do the life and times of anyone. You don't need anyone's permission to do that. All right?
Yeah.
Now, if you want to interview that person, you will need a release from them. You might, however, do what one of my clients did and make an unauthorized documentary about, what's his name? Not Enoch Powell, the Tesla man. What's he called?
Oh, yeah.
Egon Rohn, no, he begins with an E. Anyway, him. What's his name? Someone.
Elon Musk.
Thank you.
Elon Musk, that's it.
Yeah, Elon Musk. So this documentary maker, and she's made loads of these things. She does them really, really well, and she does them to order. And she said, what do you think? I'd be very careful if I were you. But she licensed a whole load of third-party interview footage with Elon Musk, which she was able to clear. And she flew to South Africa and interviewed his primary school teacher. Elon was a great pupil and all that kind of stuff. And she got clips, she got this, she got the other. And then she did a loose assembly of it. And she asked me to review it and see if there was anything I didn't like. And the key thing that I'm really looking for in those kind of documentaries about living people is whether or not there's anything defamatory there, especially with someone like Elon Musk, who has a bit of a reputation for firing off lawsuits. And there were, most of it was more of a fan club kind of thing. So it was mostly pretty positive. There were one or two things that I said, I really think you should take those out, and she did. But in the end, what she did, she sent him 2 copies of the DVD of the film and got a thank you from his office. So he must have either not bothered to watch it or thought it was all right. But if you're making documentaries about living people, you can't be defamatory, which is disparage them. I was always wondering how could you make a documentary about President Trump and not disparage him? I suppose that's the answer. Talking about musicians, again, if they're dead, it doesn't matter. right? If they're live and you want to use their music, you're going to have to clear all the compositions and any original sound recordings that they make. And this is another mistake that people commonly make, is that they'll say that they've cleared the music without realizing that within a sound recording, there is a copyright in the underlying musical work, the composition, the song, if you like, or the tune, or the lyrics and the tune. And there's a separate copyright in the sound recording, which also engages another right, which is a performer's right, because the performer of a composition on a sound recording has a right in the performance. If you're licensing an existing third-party sound recording from a record company, then the record company will very generously throw in the performer's consent with the recording. And you need to make sure you've got a warranty that says that.
Cool.
Is anyone asleep yet?
No, I think they're all wide awake.
On the other page, they're all hiding behind these black tiles, so I don't know.
So another question that's come through on the chat is, if I'm going to pass a script around my friends, do I need to get any sort of, and do I need to put anything down on paper before they read it?
Are they friends?
Are they friends or are they foes?
That's the first question you need. Well, the thing is, right, okay. This is a kind of another whole subject of which trespasses into what we lovingly call NDAs.
Yeah.
An NDA is a non-disclosure agreement, and in an ideal world, which we know no longer exists if it ever did, in an ideal world, any secret or confidential or anything that you gave anyone, you get them to sign something and, you know, basically cut their thumb and put their blood on it, saying that they will keep it secret, not nick it, not rip it off, not copy it, and not sell it to some dodgy dealer in Hollywood. Unfortunately, the world doesn't work like that. Under English law, and this this is an area of law that does vary from one part of the world to another. In English law, a duty of confidence is implied in a relationship where it is obvious that information has been disclosed in confidence. And of course, if you write to Channel 4 and say, I've got a great idea for a, you know, format or a TV show, will you sign my NDA? They will say, well, I know what they'll say when they actually open the email, but what they will say to you is, unfortunately, we don't do that. So, and the reason they won't is because until they see what it is that you've got to show them, their justification is that they don't know that they're not already doing something already similar. And with TV formats, that is an alarmingly common thing, that people come up with very similar ideas. So what you do is you say, dear Channel 4, I am submitting my screenplay to you, which I am submitting in confidence, and the copyright belongs to me. And I think there's some stuff in the book about this as an example. To the extent that's possible without an NDA, that will protect you. But it's all a question of trust. And you need to know that the ideal world, or lack of it, extends to quite big organizations who will purloin the odd idea, screenplay, script, format, short story, or whatever. So there's a lot of this is down to trust. So when you show it to your friends, so I'm going to stop doing the inverted comma things because it's a bit boring. When you show stuff to your friends, you really need to feel comfortable that they are, and they're not writers in search of an idea who can write quicker than you can.
I mean, you could also, you know, just to make yourself feel a bit better as well, you could always sort of drop them an email and just say, you know, this is this is something that I produced. I trust that you will not discuss the ideas with somebody. I mean, you know, it would be sensible to do something like that, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So beyond all of those wonderful tips and sort of suggestions to avoid pitfalls, do you have any other top tips at all for collaborators?
I love this top tips. I don't know how top they are.
Well, if they're coming from you, then they're top tips, aren't they, Tony?
They're tips.
That's a bit cheesy.
They're the tip of the tips. Bloody hell, there's some very heavyweight questions here.
Sorry.
Wow. Collaborators, yeah. I'll go back to what I said earlier. Just before you start, get a clear understanding of what this person is. I'm a producer, you are a writer. The example that I gave of, you know, suggesting, you know, the arrangement I would make with Tremaine to write my screenplay, stick it in an email. Actually, you know, have a proper contract probably. But if you're collaborating on a production, oh yeah, I know this bloke that's going to get some money. I saw something literally this week that, well, it would have made my hair fall out, but I very conveniently lost it years ago. So that way there's no chance of me losing more hair. Well, I suppose there's a bit around here. This person who's a very enthusiastic creative, and I don't know how old the bloke is. I think he must be in his 40s, I guess. He's certainly been round the, well, actually, he probably hasn't been round the block, but he's certainly been round the corner. And he met someone in a pub or something, or whatever it was, this youngish, I don't know how to describe her. Beguiling, I think, would be a good adjective. I don't know what it means, but I'm sure she was beguiling. And he said, oh, yeah, I can go out. I can raise £250,000 for this. So he agreed that she should have a 30% shareholding in his production company in which the rights were properly vested. So he just issued her 30% of the shareholding in this company. And of course, she went out and raised the grand sum of, you know, 3 postage stamps and an empty Coke can. And of course, now he's got serious interest and he's stuck with his shareholder. So, you know, if you are going to collaborate with someone who you don't really know, one of the key things is not, you know, don't give away what you don't have to. Okay, you raise the money, you get the 30%, not on a promise. And then, you know, that leads on to the big thing, which underlies several of the questions that you've asked me, Jenny. Check these people out. Are they who they say they are? Do you believe them? If you start off by, yeah, I think you should be willing to believe, but don't until you check it out. You've got so many tools. You've got IMDb. Oh yeah, no. I work with Stephen in Holiday. Stephen who? Oh yeah, really? Nah, balls, rubbish. You've got IMDb, you've got LinkedIn, you've got Facebook. You can Google. I find all of those very useful for checking people out, for the simple reason that if I don't know them, well, they all know Elliot, but he doesn't necessarily remember them all. Elliot's got 19,856 people on LinkedIn, so I forgive him when I say, Elliot, I've done this with you several times. Do you know so-and-so? And you say, no, I don't think so. I said, well, he's on your LinkedIn page. But anyway, I have done this many times on LinkedIn where someone's come up, he knows Fred Nargs. I shall phone up Fred Nargs. And Fred Nargs will say, oh, no, sorry, no, it's that one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, both, it's that and then that. Or, you know, if they say, oh, well, I worked on this film and I didn't get a credit, well, ask someone who worked on the film. If you don't know someone who worked on it, you will find someone who knows someone. But use your instinct. Don't, it's easy to make yourself make believe, you know? And a lot of the problems that I get to sort out are because people have just blindly gone into some kind of a contract or relationship, or they've given rights, or they've granted an option on something, and you know the other person is stuck in, oh, this happened just before Christmas. Unbelievable situation where client of mine, it's actually a client of the firm, but I kind of knew them, had written these books, and her friend had said, oh, I'm going to make these into a film. And this friend has made one documentary about 15 years earlier. And I couldn't work out from what I could find out online much about him. Oh, he's a friend, he's a good bloke, well connected, etc. And he told us it was a standard contract, and they signed it. And long story short, they'd given away ridiculous rights for no money and very badly drawn contract. And then they kind of twigged it wasn't right when the bloke came back 2 or 3 months later and said, oh, I need you to sign an addendum to the original contract. So my question to them is, well, if it was a standard deal, why does he need you to sign another document that's 3 times longer than the original document? And it was, it's, the mess had been made to the extent that it was not possible to sort it out fairly.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's kind of, in a way, it's almost akin to buying a house, isn't it? You know, you'd never buy a house if you hadn't looked at the deeds, or you hadn't checked out who the seller was, you hadn't done a survey. I mean, to think about it in those kind of terms, if somebody's made films, look at what they've done, talk to people who know them. I mean, it's not rocket science, that side, is it? If you can do some investigative.
It's not rocket science. It's a mixture of common sense, gut feel. You know, it's again, hey, let's have a cliche because we haven't had one for 5 minutes. If it doesn't smell right, it probably isn't. The thing is that, you know, there's nothing that I like more than someone coming to me on day one with a project, get involved, get sorted out, everything's contracted properly, the film's great, it sells, get some nice festival things, might even get a release, see it on telly, and everyone's happy. Unfortunately, I would say a third of what I do is sorting out a mess of one sort or another.
Yeah. So if you can try and avoid that, then.
And it's always more expensive to sort out the mess than to have something sorted out before you make it.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Listen, you can have a great contract and you can still make a mess afterwards.
And then moving on to the part of your book that where you set out exploitation. So I like to think of it as the spoils of our creativity. So the profit, participation, and royalties. I mean, from what you explain in the book, it feels as if making a profit is not just about the contract, but it's also about keeping really careful records of things.
If you want to make a profit, make a film about Moses. Sorry, was there a sensible question?
Yeah, so the sensible question was, it's not just about having the contract, is it? It's also about keeping a record of things as you go through.
Right, yeah, so the sensible answer to this is that if you've got anything that stands a chance of really picking up sales and generating income, the advice that I always give is to have a CAMA. What's a CAMA? Now you're supposed to say, what's a CAMA? CAMA. A CAMA is a collection account management agreement, and a collection account management agreement brackets CAMA, is something that's put in place by a collection agent. There are two main ones. The one that most British indies work with is called Freeway. Both these companies are headquartered in Hungary for some tax reason, but they've all got offices all over the place. And what the collection agent does is basically for 1% of the gross, which believe me is a tiny amount, you or your lovely sales agent, brackets not so lovely sales agent, will ensure that all the distributors and licensees to whom the film is sold account for their money to you as the producer, but will pay all of the money into the collection account so that the collection agent administers it. You will then normally have, in any significant project, what we call a payment waterfall or a recoupment waterfall, or recoupment schedule, whereby it lists the order in which the money gets allocated. So the sales agent usually get their hands on some of the top, then the people that have put in the money to make the film, maybe the deferrals, and so on and so forth. That way, both of those two companies are reliable and well established, and you'll make sure that if there is profit, you'll get your share. But in terms of counting, you need to ensure that in all the clauses, in all the agreements you sign, whereby people are paying you money, there's an obligation, A, to keep records of what they're doing with the rights, B, to account to you, 3, that you can inspect the records, 4, that you can audit the accounts, and 5, that they pay you whatever it is that's due. And each of those 5 things is very important in accounting terms. Does that answer? I can't remember what the question was.
It does answer.
It's along that sort of lines, wasn't it?
No, it does answer it, and I think that's very, very useful.
Have I passed? Do I get a 2-1 or something yet?
You get an A star. Will that do?
That's before I was before an A star even existed, I think.
We've had another question about can there be copyright on log lines? Should they be registered?
Log line?
Log lines.
Don't know, sorry. What's a log line? Someone.
So log line is Swati, do you want to unmute yourself?
Sure, Jenny. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay. Hey, Tony. So my question is, you have this logline where you explain the concept of your story in one line.
Oh, I see. Right. It's an original copyright work.
Okay. So do you advise taking a copyright on the logline itself? Because it's basically a concept.
Well, I don't know what, I think Indian copyright law is pretty much the same as UK. Yeah. But when you write it down, the copyright arises. But the problem you've got there is that copyright arises in an original work. And the problem you've got with one log line is it's substantial enough to cover. I mean, you might take the rubbish idea that I gave you for a story. Your expression or your development of that concept might be very, very different to mine.
So, yeah, so that is what I have a confusion whether we should take copyright on the logline or not, because the expression might be pretty different, right? If two writers write a story on that. So, but
I'm sorry. I don't buy this really. I'm sorry, but you put your one line down or 2 lines, okay, yeah. And you mention it to me, and you go away and write a screenplay that's about, I don't know, a family in an Indian village, and one of them goes to Mumbai and meets someone else, and they go off and do whatever, and I see it and I think, actually, I'm going to write a story about these 2 Martians that meet on an asteroid. do something in space and, I don't know, disappear into a black hole, are you going to tell me that I've infringed your copyright?
You can't.
You would stand 0 to 0 chance of suing me successfully.
Right. Yeah, so it's
if
all
on the
about
other hand, I took basically your idea and I thought, hang on, well, I'm not going to have a village in India, I'm going to have a village in South Wales, and they're going to go to Cardiff, and you know, some of the actions suggested are identical. That's slightly different. It'd be very difficult though.
Okay.
Good to know. Good to know. While you're on, Swati, you'd asked a question ahead of time about dealing with the issue of registering your script in various countries. And you asked, if you register the script in India or the UK, what kind of issues might come up with regards to releasing the film in other countries? Was that the right question?
Yeah, Jenny, that's right.
Okay.
So
I thought we really covered this, haven't we? The real point here, Swati, is that there are a number of, or two main international treaties, sort of Berne and the Universal Copyright Convention, to which most countries that would, oh, she's disappeared. Oh, you're over there now. You're over there a minute ago. You keep going from side to side. How do you do that? Is that, yeah, anyway. Yeah, so the thing is that I would say virtually everyone, I mean, I know several people on this thing today who, there's probably 10 different nationalities on this call, and the copyright that they create will be effectively governed by the countries where you know, they're nationals of, or it might be English law if they've been residents, so on and so forth. But by virtue of these international conventions, the law of any signatory country will respect the law of the counterparty. So if I'm 99% certain that India is signatory to both of those conventions, which means that if you release your film in America or Canada or UK or France or wherever it is, those jurisdictions will respect the integrity of your copyright and accord to you the same protection as they would to copyrights created by their own nationals.
that answers. Thank you. Because, you know, I had this thought that maybe, you know, I need to get a separate copyright in every country. Because I haven't, you know, done that release in other countries.
Safe with us.
Thank you. Safe in US as well?
Well, it's protected. Whether or not you're safe is another story.
Right. Good one. Thank you.
Carry a gun at the moment. I think they're handing them out on the last 3 planes that are arriving there. I think they're handing them out at the airport. Bulletproof vest and a helmet.
Oh, thank you, Swati.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you. So, Tony, the last thing I was going to mention was the B word, Brexit. Is there anything we need to worry about in this country with regards to any changes from Brexit?
Pretty much everything from what I read.
Yeah. Is that going to be in the next book?
Well, I have a section on Brexit in the 2nd edition, which says, I don't know. No, I think I mentioned previously that the copyright law isn't going to change. I mean, I remember when Brexit was voted, Elliot's still there and you're still awake, Elliot, great. Elliot asked me to put together a panel for Rain Dance Festival, was about 2016, on Brexit, and Elliot got some very high-powered Euro people to talk about it. And I can remember the thing that concerned me most, which actually concerns me more now, is just what I would put under the category of flexibility of production, because for the last, well, ever since I've been in practice, you know, I've had clients who've said, oh, we're going to film in Czech Republic or in Spain or in France or in Italy or Greece or wherever it may be. And, you know, they could just get on a plane, they could go, they didn't have to have work permits, they could hire local second unit, they could hire local actors. And the whole thing was just completely and utterly flexible. You know, overlaid with COVID, I think it's very, very difficult sitting here now to really grasp how much all of that will change. I mean, you know, I listen to, for those of you who don't know, I live in Tel Aviv, so I'm not actually in UK very often. Well, I haven't been in UK for a while. I listen to BBC Radio News every single morning for at least an hour or less if I get really bored and frustrated. And I listen to these, I've got this thing about, there's no such thing as an expert, but I listen to these experts and they're talking about, you know, tariffs and lorries and queues and bits of paper and registering stuff. And I'm thinking, well, what we used to do is, you know, you get a van and stick a few cameras and a few lights on, jump on the Eurostar, you're in France, drive down to Italy, make you know, commercials. Some of my clients shoot commercials. I don't know how, I really don't know. I don't know how that's all going to pan out. All I do know is it's going to be a hell of a lot more complicated.
Yeah, exactly.
And they won't have us back.
I don't know, they might do.
They'll
different leadership, you never know. Anyway, I don't want to get political.
No, I don't get political either. I was sitting here last night trying to do some work, and my sister who lives in California sent me a WhatsApp saying, "Are you watching what's happening?" And I said, "Well, what?" And she said, "You know, this Capitol thing." So I went on to BBC TV, which I can stream, and of course I didn't do any more work until about, you know, anyway. So yes.
I had the same thing happening. I was like, what's going on?
I know, exactly.
Apparently they like took the ballot boxes and like had to protect them and take them, like move everybody and then move them, the boxes too. And I was like, oh my God, this is dramatic.
No more politics. Right, what's next?
So next is anything you have to do to adapt a book, I think I saw a question on.
Ah, that's a great question. Congrats for answering it. Yeah, adaptation. What I simply answer to that is, if you go onto the Raindance Festival website from about 3 months ago, I did a panel on adaptations, which we had attending Julian Freeman, who's a very, very high-powered literary agent, Hilary Salmon, who's a former BBC producer, now independent, who's done lots of adaptations, and a guy called Ridian Brooke, who, if you listen to Radio 4, you will have heard him, but he's a screenwriter and a novelist. And we were discussing all of that. So if you want a riveting hour on adaptations, I would recommend that. But simply, what do you need to do? Well, if the book is in copyright, you will need to get the rights from the copyright owner. If it's a novel, the film rights will usually be controlled by the author, which means dealing with the author's literary agent, usually. If it's a non-fiction work and you want to adapt it, you'll need to get the rights. If you're going to take a non-fiction work and use it as a basis for something, you need to tread warily as to whether or not you clear the rights. But as soon as you ask someone, do I need to clear them? They'll say, well, if you didn't think you did, why are you asking me? And in non-fiction books, sometimes the rights will be controlled by the publisher and not the writer. It really depends. You have to investigate that. And then the other thing that you need to think about is, well, some authors, book authors think about is moral rights. And that's the integrity, the moral right of integrity in their work. Moral right integrity means that as an author, you have a right that your work be not made, that you can't have a derogatory treatment made of your work. So, for example, the example I give in the book is the historical novel based around a chaste relationship, a platonic relationship. But it may well be that if you were the author of that book, you would stipulate in the agreement that the producer could not have these two chaste characters engaging in physical activity on screen, because it's contrary to the integrity of the story and therefore a derogatory treatment. If you've written a book with an anti-war message, you wouldn't want the producer or the director to turn it into something that said the opposite. And that's an actual situation that I did have, that we had to get a film taken off the market about. But anyway, those are the kind of main things. The other thing is, if you're adapting a book, as a general rule, you don't want the book author getting too involved in what you're writing for the screen, because it's a totally different discipline, and a writer and a director are going to look at something very, very different from a novelist. You know, there's some fantastic examples of this. There was a brilliant film made, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago called The Prestige, which I think had Christian Bale, it had cameos from Michael Caine, David Bowie, Hugh Jackman, I think. It is a brilliant film. I read the book afterwards, and I think it's probably the best adaptation I've ever read, because the book is very odd. It's written in a very unusual kind of structure. And wasn't it Christopher Nolan, I think, did the screenplay? I think he did anyway. Yeah, thank you, Randall. It's just such, if you watch that film and then read the book, you'll just see how you can look at adaptation. And I'm damn sure that when Christopher Nolan optioned that book, he said, I'm optioning it, you stay away, just let me make the film. And I think the film was just stunning anyway. That's personal.
Sorry, if I may.
You may.
The reason I've asked the question is I've got a friend who's reading a novel, and I was lucky enough to be one of the first group of people to read it. And we had like an agreement in principle for me to adapt it into a screenplay.
Which book, sorry?
He's written a new book, which is getting a publishing deal. But prior to getting a publishing deal, we had an agreement for me to adapt to a screenplay. So I just wanted to know what sort of things I need to look out now that it might be getting a publishing deal.
Have you got anything in writing?
Yeah, we do have some stuff in writing.
Right. Depending on how it's written and what it says, then it would be enforceable. And the one thing that you must do is to let him know that he should tell the publisher that he's already agreed in principle to give you an option to acquire the film rights.
Sweet. Thank you.
Thanks. Good question. So another one that's come up, Tony, is what should you do legally before you have a table reading of a script?
Get a table.
Is there anything, do you need to get agreement from people involved in that, or is the fact that you're doing it enough to say this? I've been to a few of these things. It's usually pretty informal. I went to one, I remember once, so it's quite a few years ago, where there were a couple of quite well-known actors there, and I thought, oh. And this woman client of mine who'd written it, she's one of these very effusive people who'd get you. She's well, I'm going to phone up Tom Hanks, and it wasn't Tom Hanks, but you could just imagine her. Just look, has he got an afternoon? Just come along. So she had a couple of really quite well-known folks there, and I'm convinced that she had not gone through the agent. And it's like, well, they're there. The fact that you've just got them there, I don't think you should start asking them to assign things.
Sometimes, I mean, I suppose if they're being paid, you want some kind of confidentiality. I never really thought about it, to be honest with you.
I mean, what I did was we did have, so Shane, who was on earlier, I don't know if he still is, we had a table reading for Shane, and I think we sent out something when we sent out the script to say, you know, this was Shane's property, please do not share it, please do not discuss the ideas within it.
Yeah.
And so we did that, and we said, you know, you can only attend on that basis. I mean, there was nothing particularly formal, but we had something at least to express that people were aware that's what we expected. And Shane was happy with that, and hopefully nothing will go wrong. But I think at least to have something which sets the expectation and the limit of things.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fair enough.
Okay. So another interesting one from Adil. Could you talk a bit about true stories, whether experience...
It's filmed by David Byrne, came out in 1984 or 5, Talking Heads soundtrack.
Okay. And whether having rights to them in the process of getting them on screen in whatever form.
Right, okay, this comes up all the time. And I get asked to advise about this an awful lot because there are areas of grey. But if you go back to what I said earlier, I can't remember, but you might. There's no copyright in these things. So the example that I always give is this. And about half the people on this thing have probably heard this before, so I apologise. But it's a good example. Some clients of mine were co-producers on a film called The Life and Death of Peter Sellers. And most of you will, certainly all of you should know that Peter Sellers was a great comedy actor, comedian, comic character, best known for Inspector Clouseau, but actually did lots and lots and lots of other quite big films. These producers put together a movie, and if you went online and Googled Peter Sellers now, most of you would be able to write a 5-page essay about his life by tomorrow morning and have it on my desk. And there's just loads and loads of information out there about him. And this film was made for HBO. It was a 2-hour thing. And about very, very shortly before it was due to be released, not one, but 2 authors of books about Peter Sellers came out of the woodwork and said, you know, there's no way you could have made this film without infringing my copyright. And this, of course, without having even seen the film. And the E&O insurers for the film basically took a view and said, well, this is a load of bollocks, but actually we'll pay you a bit of money because it's just easier to give you a bit of money than to spend a fortune on lawyers fighting you. And that was that. What that really tells you is this, and this is very interesting because when we did the Rain Dance adaptation panel, Hilary Salmon actually said, you know, if I'm filming a true story and there is a bit of IP out there and it's not going to be expensive to do so, I will option that work because then I've got a bit of IP I can rely on. There's another project that I'm working on at the moment where a historian, a very academic historian working in, I think she's at Oxford University. She's quite renowned in a very bizarre area of history. And she's written this extraordinary book, which I did read. It's very unusual. And it's a story set in the 19th century. And she must have done absolutely tons and tons of research. And quite apart from a series of events that are described in this book, what she's done is extrapolated the characters of the main protagonists. And my client is the producer who came to me and said, I want to make this film. I think I'm going to have to option this book. And I said, yes, you definitely will, because there, in order to replicate the extent of detail about these characters, you would have to, you couldn't really do it, because some of it is clearly slightly supposition and hypothesis based on how these characters reacted to their particular circumstances. So in that case, they, she quite properly, you know, she's optioned the project from the author of the book, and she is, in fact, the author has actually had a fair bit of input with the writer in putting together the screenplay. But generally, if it is possible for you to construct the story from your own research and whatever, interviews, etc., then you wouldn't necessarily need to clear something. But you know, I'll go back to what I said before, and this was said to me by a literary agent. If someone phones up and says, do I need to clear the book for this, that, or the other project, I'm straight away going to say, well, if you didn't think so, why are you making the call?
Great.
Does that answer the question?
It does, I think.
I never know.
We've got another one here from Evie Joyce. If someone is sharing a story time from their experience in life and it inspires a script, do you actually need their permission to use their story? Or because they've said it on social media, can you just use it without permission?
Well, you need to be a bit careful, because if they put it on social media, once they put the written expression of that story in on their Facebook page, whatever it is, then the copyright arises. I think you need to be a bit careful also, because I can't remember what Facebook's rules say about who owns what. It's all a bit of a mess. I think the answer is tread with care.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Tony. Tony, I'm conscious of time. You've been incredibly generous with your time and the information that you've shared.
You were paying me. Very nervous laugh there, Jenny.
Very, very nervous laugh, isn't it?
I have the bailiffs round in the morning, yeah.
But it's been really, really helpful. And I want to give you another plug for your course. So just to say as well that I've done Tony's course, and I'm a lawyer myself, so I am used to legal information, but I think it's something that, you know, is geared to people really at all levels. And the way you teach is in a very sort of no nonsense practical way. And you also give very helpful slides as well, which are very on point. So I'd really sort of recommend them to anybody who hasn't done them before. Do you want to say anything else about when they are, or?
I do.
Anything else?
I'll have to look at my thing and then I can tell you. So we've got, there's a series of 4 evenings starting at the beginning of Feb, I do believe. I will tell you. Here we go. Right. So starting on the 4th of February, 4 evenings of 2 hours. The first evening is rights in films and contracts. The second one on the 8th is hiring writers and directors. So there'll be an hour on each on writers agreements, and an hour on directors agreements. Number 3 on the 11th of February is production agreements and what you need to do to get stuff in front of the camera. So we'll be talking about performers' consents, interviews, people in the background, locations, stuff on set, whatever that means, incidental inclusion, buildings, and so on. And then lecture 4, music in films and sales and distribution agreements. Each of those is 2 hours, an hour on each subject. You can book all 4, 3, 2, 1, or you don't have to bother at all. And then on Thursday, the 23rd of March, is my contribution to the Rain Dance Producers Certificate. So that's 2.5 hour sort of overview of rights, contracts, and you know, everything in between, except for the bits that I leave out.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Tony. Thank you.
And that's it.
Thank you. It's been really, really informative tonight. And for anybody that, you know, I think sensibly, if you are going to create, this is super helpful. It's a really good investment. Not just saying that because Tony's here. It is really good. And I don't think there is anything else like it, really.
Hard copies are available from Denise at Raindance. And if you're buying online, make sure you get the second edition. It's on Kindle.
Cool. And there's lots of love coming in for you here, Tony.
Is there? Oh.
Well, not love, but thanks. And, you know,
there's 22 messages.
Really enjoyed this. Love you, Tony.
I'll have to look at these. Gosh. So I haven't really, usually when I do my own lectures, I have to keep an eye on all this stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, I've been doing that for you.
Thank you. There's some very long contract things here. Okay, right.
If anybody wants to save the chat, if you click on the 3 little dots at the bottom right-hand corner, you can scroll up to save chat. I'm sure everybody knows that already, but I'm not very techie, so I just thought I'd mention it. Great. Well, thank you very, very much for coming, everybody. And now you can go and watch Netflix or Amazon Prime or Amazon Video, whatever it's called. There's still a few hours left of the evening, or daytime, actually, because you could be anywhere in the world. And Swati, you need to go to sleep.
Well, it's 20 to 11 here, so.
Oh, well, I think for Swati, what time is it there, Swati? Is it 1:30 or something?
It's 2:10.
Oh, 2:10.
Oh yeah, because you've got the half hour, haven't you? Yeah.
That's commitment for you there. Hard creative.
I didn't make sure I attend this. After the 2, I missed.
So thank you again, everybody, and good luck with all of your creative projects. And do sign up for Tony's course if you haven't already. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
See you later, Tony.
Yeah, okay, Jenny, can I call you back in about like 2 seconds when everyone's gone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Elliot?
You're calling me, Tony?
No, Jenny.
Oh, Jenny, of course. Yeah, yeah. Okay, Tony, see you
soon,
guys.
Elliot. Cheers.
Good to see you, Paul and Lyndon.
You,
I know Lyndon's got a music question for you.
Yeah, no, I'll do that one quickly and then
okay.
I'll call Jenny afterwards.
See you later, alligator. Bye-bye. Nice to see you, Swati. Bye-bye.
See you too.
Yeah, nice to see you, Swati. Good night.
It is. Yeah, Lyndon, do you want to ask your question quickly before I crash out?
Okay. Thanks, Tony. Thanks for a wonderful.
Is this working?
Thanks, buddy.
Bye.
Hello?
Yeah, hi.
Oh, yeah, just a very quick question. You already answered the thing about was it worth it, the sync license. It was just, this is my first time dealing with this, so I don't want to sound like a complete, amateur when I get back to them. BMG Music. It was, they want $350 per side. Now, does that mean they want 700 total? Is that what per side means?
Well, I presume they're talking about a 2-sided single and they want $350 for each track.
It's one track and it's the composition rights I want. I don't want the master rights.
Right. And
they said $350 per side.
Then I don't know what that means.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not good. I'll have to ask them. And,
no. It's another. Well, it's cliche night. The only cliches are the only dumb questions are the ones you don't ask.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, that's interesting. And the other one was, they said MFN, which is it?
Most Favoured Nations.
What I tried to find out what that meant, and it
Well, what it basically means is that if you do a deal for a composition with them for 350, then you come to me and I say, well, I want 400 for mine. That means you've got to then pay another 50 to the other person.
Right, so everyone pays the same. Yeah. But what if I've really got? And
you'll find that when you're doing actor agreements, like if you get a lead in,
yeah,
and you know, you get your B-list you know, for your British independent film, they're going to do it for 10 grand. The agent will know damn well that you're going to have to pay 15 for the female lead, and you've only paid 10 for the thing, and knows that you're only going to get that female lead because you've got the male lead. The agent will put in an MFN provision so that when you do get the ingenue on board, her client will get the extra 5 grand as well.
Does that apply if the other song I've got is, you know, the master? So would the MFN apply for the because that's just composition I want?
Sometimes they'll say that, and very often the master, if it's a copyright where that's used a lot, the publisher and the record company will work together, and they'll work on that basis.
Okay, I don't think the song is used very much, and it was good of you to say, you know, if it's just festivals, it's kind of like, what's the point? And that's
that's my view.
It makes sense because then you can't sell it.
Well,
you know,
exactly.
so
you have to go back, and then they'll say, "Oh, well, yeah, we want much."
Yeah.
I mean, you can build in an extra lump for something, but I wouldn't. You need to pre-agree what it is you're going to be doing.
I mean, the other quick question was, in the UK, do you have to pay actors minimum wage, or can you, in your contract, say, I will pay you this amount, which is not minimum wage, but then maybe I can pay you percentage?
Yeah, you can.
Fine. Oh, that's all right then. Okay, just good. Well, thank you so much. That was really helpful. Bye-bye.
Right.
Thanks.
Okay. Right. I'll buzz you back in a tick, Jenny.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
Take care. Lovely seeing you.
See you next time. Thank you.
Okay.